Hey, welcome to the I Have a Dream show. I'm your host, Princess Fizz. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in. It's absolutely wonderful to see you here. The regular viewers, obviously, it's awesome to see you. The new viewers, where you are, you're on a web TV. It's an interactive TV online where I bring on amazing entrepreneurs from around the world. And what they do is they come on and share their journey with you and share all, kind of really dig deep on how they've actually started, how they've actually been successful. Because the thing is, when we see them today, we see them as successful. We don't actually know what goes on in the background, you know. So my kind of aim is to bring out value from the entrepreneurs and bring you the really the gold nuggets of what it takes to build an empire in the market. So starting from completely scratch, there's lots of different stories that come on the show, but today's story is exceptional. I mean, I've been following this entrepreneur for a while now, and I'm completely in awe of how he's actually built a multi-million empire from scratch. And it's intriguing because there was no actual market for this kind of the products that he launched. So it's really interesting to see how he's actually created his own market as well. And also we're going to talk about something very interesting where it's finding a valuable asset within you and how to leverage that. So wherever you are, whatever your dreams are, we're going to inspire you to make them come true. And it's an interactive show, so guys, please do ask questions. It's a great opportunity to get your questions answered. But we'll take you through the journey. I want to proudly welcome actually, a wonderful entrepreneur, Brian Smith, coming live from California. Thank you so much, Brian, for joining the show today.
Hi, Princess. Thanks for having me. It's going to be fun.
It's going to be brilliant. I mean, as I said, it's just amazing how your story has just unfolded. And people that don't know Brian, I don't know, you're probably living in a desert or something, but he is the founder of these beautiful shoes, boots, I would say, and they are Ugg boots. Can you see them here? They are Ugg boots, right? And they've been so popular. I mean, it's such a simple design. And the way that it's just exploded in the market is just absolutely brilliant. But there is a strategy behind it, so we're going to talk about that. But Brian, I want to know more about you. I mean, what is your story from let's rewind a little bit and kind of talk about your family background, perhaps. Maybe talk to me about who were you inspired by. I know you've gone into accountancy before you got into entrepreneurship, so perhaps talk about your journey there, how that shift happened.
Okay, then. Well, I had a sort of normal upbringing for Australia. I played football, rugby, and just did all that sort of stuff. And I wasn't great at academics. In fact, when I left high school, I didn't get a pass that was equivalent to going to university.
Right.
So all my friends went to uni, and I was sitting around for weeks, months, not knowing what to do. And my mother said one day, well, look at your father's friends. What do they do? And I thought of the guy who owned the biggest house in a Mercedes, and I said, well, what does Mr. Owens do? And he said, well, he's a chartered accountant. So I said, okay, that's what I'll do. It was just the stupidest, logic, because years later, when I realized how much I hated accounting, I thought back, maybe he inherited the house and the Mercedes, but nevertheless, my direction was set, and it took me 10 years to graduate as an accountant.
Wow, okay.
And the day I graduated is the day I quit, because I really did not want to be one.
So in the 10 years, I mean, didn't you figure out it wasn't for you, or were you really determined to kind of complete your graduation?
Yeah, one thing about me is that I hate quitting anything.
Right.
Once I start a goal, I like to stick with it, and as we talk more, you'll see how that paid off in the Ugg boot business.
Absolutely. So you didn't actually work as an accountant at all?
I worked for 10 years, because I didn't get a university pass. I had to work for an accountant and do my studies at night. That's why it took so long.
Oh, I see. Right. Okay. So you knew quickly that wasn't for you. So what did you do next?
Well, I was after I graduated and quit, I spent about 6 weeks, took a little trip to Bali with my friends on a little yacht, and came back. And I was bored with doing nothing, and so I just discovered meditation. Like I just discovered yoga back then, and I was meditating, and this thought came across me that, wow, all of the all of the cool things are coming out of California,
Right.
and I should go to California and look for the next big trend that's coming out of California, and go there and find it and bring it back to Australia.
Wow.
And,
Okay.
yeah, and when I had that thought, I got goosebumps, which I figured out as my spirit telling me, hey, you're on the right track.
Excellent. Excellent. Right.
Yeah, so I got a ticket to California, and I was living there for 2 or 3 months, doing odd jobs, and I still hadn't found the next big thing. And I was surfing a lot up at Malibu, which was like, for a surfer, that's like the pinnacle of great riding. And I was flicking through a magazine that my buddy brought over, a surfer magazine, and there was a photograph of these legs up in front of a fireplace, and the legs had sheepskin boots on, and I went, oh my God, and I got goosebumps again. And it was like, there are no sheepskin boots in America.
Wow.
And at that time, 1 in 2 Australians had some sort of sheepskin footwear, So I thought I was going to be instant millionaire from seeing that.
But hold on a minute. I mean, sheepskin boots. I would think though, for very cold environments. I mean, how did you think that it would work in Australia? Is Australia climate? I mean, I don't really know much about the climate, but
well, just keep in mind that Australia is full of sheep. Millions and millions of sheep. So the skins are always a byproduct of the meat industry.
Right.
And so rather than putting them in a landfill, people would make, car seat covers or bed underlays or stuff, and they started making footwear, and a bunch of surfers started doing it because when you get out of the wind, the surf in the winter, your feet are freezing, and because the sheepskin just wicks the moisture away, your feet are dry and warm in like 5 or 10 minutes. So that's sort of how it started.
So, I mean, what happened then? So you had the idea. Did you study the market at all? I mean, how did you go about it? Did you see women wearing it? I mean, did you visualize? Was it for women to start off with?
No, it was. To answer your first question, I did no market research.
Okay.
Because I just knew how big and successful I was going to be instantly.
Right.
So we bought a couple of samples, and I did this with a buddy. We borrowed $500 and bought some samples, and we started. Doug was my friend. He was going to be the salesman, so he went around to all the shoe stores in Los Angeles, and came back a week later with hundreds of business cards and no orders.
Right.
And they're saying, why are you trying to sell sheepskin in California? Don't you know it's hot here? No one wears sheepskin.
Yes.
And so I thought, well, inside I knew they were wrong because Australia's climate's exactly like California. But I thought, okay, let's go back and try New York since, it's a colder climate. So there was a little trade show happening, and I got a tiny piece of a table at one of the booths way at the back of the show, and in 3 days, the people were looking at the espadrilles from Spain on one side, and they were flipping over and looking at the pumps from Taiwan next to me, and like I might have had car parts or meat or something on the table because nobody recognized it as footwear.
Yeah.
And so it was only on the plane going back to San Diego that I thought, how come all my friends know about it? And it struck me they were all surfers.
Right.
And all the California guys who went down to Australia surfing in the 60s brought 3 or 4 pairs back for their buddies.
Right.
So it was really, really well known in the surf market.
Right.
So to round out your question with an answer, that was our market research.
Right. Okay. So that's how it started. Right. Okay.
Going out and failing and trying to figure out, okay, what's the niche? Where does it fit? And we figured out that it was the surf shops, and so we started selling into the surf shops.
Right. Was it the same shape, or was it a different design? Was it
Oh
the
no, they were really primitive. What you're holding now is a very refined style. It looks pretty basic, but
yeah,
all of the work in the heel counter to make it stand up properly, and the grade of skins that we use, and the
right.
type of stitch cutting is very sophisticated now compared to my boots were two pieces of skins stitched together, glued to a piece of plastic sole. That was the beginning.
So what happened after that? I mean, did it start to, did your business kind of start to grow from that market then, hitting the surface?
Yeah, well, I keep in mind I thought I was going to be an instant millionaire when I went into this venture, and to be a good entrepreneur, you have to have some level of ignorance or
Right.
innocence, because if you knew all the obstacles before you went into it,
Yeah.
you would never start.
Never start.
So,
That's absolutely right.
so that's one of my requirements for being a good entrepreneur, is that you don't really have all the answers.
Where
Uh,
did this belief come from, Brian? I mean, I'm interested to know because I mean, was there anyone around you that's inspired you? Have you seen people's traits around you? Like, does it come from something that you've discovered that you had? I mean, having a belief in something that is not even out there it's a lot of guts, It takes a lot of guts and courage.
well, it was already out there in Australia, so I always had that to fall back on.
Right.
I thought, okay, if 1 in 2 Australians owns a pair of sheepskin, there must be something good about them. So I just had to find what it was to get into California. So in the surf market, we didn't do great straight off,
No.
and the weekends I was selling at this, swap meets, and they're like little fairs, and when I'd go surfing up at Malibu, I had a complete size run in the back of my van, and I would open up and have like be open for business in out of my van.
Right.
And in the first year's sales, believe it or not, was $1,000, 28 pairs.
Oh, okay.
And I had bought 500 pairs in, thinking how big I was going to be, And so I realized, that should have been the time to quit, but I had all this inventory, so I kept going. And the first year we sold about $30,000, and so we started getting these models and putting them on the rocks at Wind and Sea Beach, and doing these beautiful, perfect hair and perfect boots, and really good looking models, and we'd run ads, and the next year's sales $30,000 again.
Right.
And I couldn't get into the mall stores; they wouldn't even give me an appointment.
Right.
And I thought I was a real failure for that. So the next year I got even better looking models and more expensive photographers, and I put them on the beach, and the sales again were about $35,000.
Right.
And I was so frustrated. I was back in Chicago at the buying office of a big department store called Montgomery Ward's, who were in the malls, and I gave my best sales pitch ever.
Right.
And he just looked at me. There's a long silence, and then he said, "Brian, why are you here?"
Uh-huh.
And I said, "Because I want to get an order for the California stores." He said, "Don't you get it, Brian? We're the elephants. We don't move till the mice are running around under our feet."
Wow.
I instantly knew what he meant, because unless I got all the specialty stores just clamoring for it, the malls were not going to take a risk. So I went back to California, and I was having a beer with one of my surf shop owners, a good friend, and I was explaining my dilemma, and he calls out to the back of the shop, with all these little Grammys, we used to call them, and the 12 and 13-year-old kids that used to hang out in the shop, and he said, "Hey, you guys, what do you think of Uggs?" And they walked into the room, and they're going, "Oh, those Ugg boots, man, they're so fake. Have you seen those ads? Those models, they can't surf." Instantly it hit me again that God, I'm sending the wrong message to my target market.
Yeah,
And so, like in a couple of days, I found a couple of young pro surfers, and they, got them really cheap, for a couple of pairs of boots each, and we started photographing them walking to the beach and from the beach, and just casual stuff like that. And I ran those ads in this, the fall season, and sales went to $250,000 just like within 2 or 3 months. So
That's
It,
amazing. So it's a lot of persistence, and taking on the negative comments and kind of acting on them, changing, being flexible, all these kind of traits that you have to kind of show before
yeah,
you success, right? So,
yeah, and it was just it's hanging in there, trying to figure out what the resistance is. I've got a great saying that's in my book. It's the quickest way for a tadpole to become a frog
uh-huh.
is to live every day happily as a tadpole,
Oh, cool. Excellent.
And
Love
it
that.
sounds weird, but it's a very, very deep piece of philosophy. And if you relate that to my business, and I'm sure all of your listeners who are in the multi-level marketing business, it seems like sometimes you're out there beating your head, and nothing's moving. And eventually, if you just keep at it, then something will break, and you'll get that little launch into the marketplace that'll make it worthwhile.
Excellent. Right, can we go back a bit, Brian? Because we've kind of skipped a couple of things. You very. I was just I was listening to you so attentively that I missed a couple of things. But I want to talk about this stage. You know, the point where you have a dream, and
Yep.
you get an idea, right? You get your idea.
Yep.
You've got your board open. You map it all out. You're excited. You can see it happening. But when it actually comes to the implementation part and finding the right people, the resources, people kind of switch and kind of go for second best and don't follow through the original idea they have.
Yeah.
Can I ask you why that happens? And if people feel that they are in the situation, how would they kind of overcome that? What would you advise them for sticking to what they originally planned and going for it?
Okay. I can answer this really with experience because I have so many people come up to me after I get off stage from speaking, and they go, "Thank you, Brian. Now I get it." And, and what they get is that I tell this like what I've figured out over the years is that you can't give birth to adults, right? Every business idea is conceived, and that's the purity that you're talking about, right? You conceive this idea and you're just totally committed to it, and then you take some action, which is giving birth. In my case, it was buying samples from Australia,
Right.
and you give birth,
Yep.
and then every business or movement or whatever it is, service that you have, just goes into this horrible infancy,
Right.
and just like an infant, it just lies there, and now and again you get a giggle out of it, but it's just feeding diapers, changing diapers, and there's no amount of overfeeding or urging can get that infant to get up and go to college.
Right.
It has to be an infant. And this is where people start to think they're failing.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
That's when they go for second best, right?
Right.
Because instead of still maintaining that passion and knowing the purity of what they started out to do, they get discouraged because of that slow infancy period. But if you hang in there, you'll start to toddle, which is when people are starting to take interest in it, and the early adopters are getting on board. And then it'll build to the youth, which is a fabulous period where you got consistent orders coming in, the production's great, the sales are good, the accounting's good, and that's a great period. But if it's like UGG and it's a really good product or service, you'll hit the teenage phase, and the business wants to be everywhere at once, just like at every party at the same night, and that's a really, really dangerous phase. And I almost lost UGG a couple of times during that phase, but ultimately the accountants and the managers put in all the systems to control it. It becomes mature. So to answer your question, it's the discouragement that makes people start to lose their dream and start to change it.
So is it part of the process then? I mean, this is something that you have to expect on your journey. I mean, there's no kind of free ride or easy kind of way to do it. You have to go through the process. I mean, you yourself, Brian, going through the process, I'm sure you've picked up so much knowledge and experience, and it's grown you as a person as well too.
Well, very much so, yeah.
So how do you think the process helped you?
Well, I'll give you a little story about that led up to me learning probably the most powerful piece of philosophy I have in my book. Right, I had grown the company to a couple of $1 million, and when you grow fast like that, you always run out of capital.
Right.
And so I'd brought in these 3 guys who were going to be my partners. We were going to be 25% each, owning the business, and I was going to be the sales rep for Southern California, but I didn't get my 25% till I finished up this little trademark lawsuit with a competitor.
Right.
Which I knew I would win. So it's a pretty good deal for me going in, and so we moved all the warehouse up to Anaheim, where they were, and I went on the road the very first day, and I went into Huntington Surf and Sport down at the beach, and as soon as I walked in, the owner goes, "Hey, Brian, I heard you sold the business." What? He said, "Yeah, I just called an order, and they said you don't own it anymore." And I went,
oh my goodness.
And like, I went to this is before cell phones, and I went next door to the gas station and called up the office. And what are you telling people? And he just said, "Well, Brian, you don't own the company till you solve the lawsuit, And,
oh my goodness, yeah. So.
And I drove back to San Diego, and I was like into depression, because all of my dreams, the vision of starting this, multinational empire was just like crashed because I didn't own the company. And so I went into a lot of thought and meditation for the next 3 days, and I figured out that, okay, well, what do I do best? I'm really good at selling now, and so I decided, well, okay, then what can I sell? Because I considered real estate and all this stuff, and I said, well, the best product I could think of is Ugg boots. And so I sort of ate humble pie, and I went back and I decided, okay, well, I'll just go on the road and be the sales rep. Wow. And a month later, I came back, and Neil handed me a check, an envelope. I opened it up. It's $5,000. It was my commissions for the month.
Wow.
I had never pulled a cent out of the business before this.
Wow.
And the next month was $10,000, and the following month was another $10,000, and I was out there having a ball with all my surf retailers, and we're all friends, and we're having a good time, and I didn't do any office work or shipping or receiving or packing, nothing,
It was a blessing in disguise then. It was a blessing in disguise.
Yeah, and so what I realized was what I quote in my book, that most often your most disappointing disappointments become your greatest blessings.
Excellent, absolutely.
This is a classic case of having my dreams just shattered. Absolutely. And then, finding out it's a fantastic thing. And later on, I got the company back 100% again by a fluke. So, it was just one of those sort of things on the path.
Excellent. So I like the way you didn't dwell on it for too long. I mean, we can't control external factors, but we can control our internal world, how we deal with it. How deep can that emotion go that a disastrous kind of event causes that we think is disastrous, but how deep that emotion goes and how long you dwell on it. So I like the way you kind of handled it very quickly. And say that you're quite a spiritual person. I mean, I'm picking up that you're quite a spiritual person.
Very much so. Yeah, I dig deep, and I ask for the help of my inner being. What should I do? What should I do? And if you're quiet enough and you spend, there's no magic formula for meditation, but if you just get away and really, really have a solution that you're trying to find that you don't know what it is, and you ask for help, it's staggering how often you'll get the answer.
Right, wonderful, absolutely beautiful. So now you've conquered the kind of surfers market, right? How did this kind of come over to the women's side? I mean, where did this idea come from?
The initial thing was after about 5 years. Remember when I told you about how I started advertising the young surfers?
Yes.
Okay, well, we also started including girls in the ads. So what a cool to be in those ads, right? And the interesting thing was like most of the kids they didn't have any income, but every Christmas they say, "Hey, Mom, I want a pair of Ugg boots." All the cool kids at school have got Ugg boots.
Right.
And so you know, the moms not realizing that they're sold in surf shops start walking the malls and saying, "Do you have UGG boots?" "No." What are UGG boots?" You know, and you know, every department store. And so that was when the mice got running around in the malls.
Uh-huh.
Right?
I see.
And that was how we're going to do that. But the interesting thing was the mums are buying the product for the kids, and bit by bit they're trying them on themselves, going, "Oh my God, these are so cool." So then they started buying for themselves and for the for the girls in the family, and so that's we sort of backed into the female market.
So
By
the market kind of created itself. I mean, I think this is where the attraction marketing comes in, because you positioned yourself very well with the surface market, and with your good ads, and you chose the right kind of message to go out, and that's what attracted the women and the children, or however way that happened. But it kind of created its own place in the market.
Yeah. And speaking of attraction marketing, that like we were big in surf, but nobody heard of us, back east in America. So like no one in Minneapolis ever reads a surfing magazine, right?
Yes.
So it was okay. How do we branch out? Well, we did it through skiing and snowboarding. We got a really good image, but that was still California driven.
Right.
And back east, I was working with my sales rep, and I asked one of the retailers, well, what do the kids do here for sport in the winter? And the answer was ice hockey.
Right.
And it was, oh my God, there's probably more ice hockey players than there are surfers. So we started a program advertising in little hockey magazines and stuff, again going after the youth. And how we backed into the women's market there was the mums were, because these skating rinks are at 40 degrees, and the moms have to sit there, and they bring the kids along, and while the son is playing, the mom's freezing, so they started buying them for themselves, and as soon as they did that, then they bought it for all the females in the family. So the females sort of backed into it at that ground level. But we still didn't crack the whole big national market. That's another story to itself.
Right, before we get into that, we've got a question coming in. Thank you, Julie Waters, for joining the show today. She's asking, how did you come up with the name Uggs?
Well, nobody knows what that means.
No one.
There's like a half a dozen people in Australia all claim that they invented it, but nobody really knows. And when I said everybody wore sheepskin boots, well, at the time in Australia there were like 30 different little factories all making sheepskin boots, and they all called them UGG or UG or UGG or UGH or UGHS. Every way you could spell UGG, they were just doing it, So it was sort of generic in a sense down there. Yeah. And it was when I came here I just picked UGG and registered that as my business, and that's what I built the brand around.
Excellent, I love it. Absolutely wonderful. Right, we've got Simon coming in. He said, I picked up that you use strategy of magazines to promote your business. Isn't that an expensive route to go down when you're starting a business, or can you suggest other ways that are as effective?
Okay, well, this is before the internet. That was pretty much the only thing there was. It was like newspapers, or you could print up flyers and send them out, but I didn't have the money for that.
Right.
And there were the two key magazines. There were two surfing magazines that I advertised in because I was really targeting on that, and there was a great little magazine called Action Sports Retailer, which was a trade magazine that went out to all of the owners of the various sporting goods stores, and just with those three is what I built the business on. But now it would be all internet driven. In fact, my book now is like totally internet driven, and all my publicity is driven that way. So yeah, nowadays it's very, very easy for someone with very little money to come in and make a great image, and that's a whole other story to itself too.
And that you can find in the book, and you've gone into much more detail in that, haven't you? So That's brilliant. Okay, so right, Brian. So let's talk about your expansion now, because obviously you've entered into the market where women are interested now. You know, got children interested. How did you actually capture that then? I mean, how did you capture that? How did you get? Did the shops start approaching you? How did that work?
Yeah, there was a couple of things, and I'll put them in order. One was I tried to do this public relations campaign, and I really wanted to get into a newspaper called USA Today, which is the big newspaper here, and they have a lifestyle section which is very, very powerful. And we met with the editor for that section, but when we arrived for our appointment 5 minutes early, she came out and said, "Oh, I'm so sorry, Brian, I've double booked.
Oh,
I've only got 5 minutes, and I
right.
have to go on a conference call." And so instead of this huge presentation that I'd spent weeks working on, I just had this idea. I pulled out a little file of photographs that I'd kept just randomly, but it was everyone who was a personality, and I went through, Sting and Tom Petty and Neil Young and Heather Locklear, Brooke Shields, all these people that were wearing Uggs, and then there was one which was Pamela Anderson from Baywatch,
Wow.
standing on the beach in a pair of tall white Ugg boots in a red swimsuit, and I was sort of embarrassed by it, so I tried to flick by it, and she goes, give me that, and she took the name of the photographer and the name of it was a London tabloid of all things, newspaper, and she said, "Sorry, I got to go," and I thought I'd totally blown it. Well, the next day in the front section of the whole lifestyle thing was this beautiful expose on UGG, and she'd done a ton of research over the night and just put out this fabulous thing. And so by the time I got back to San Diego the next afternoon, I got into the office and I heard that the phones had not stopped with retailers wanting to know how to stock the product.
Wow.
and consumers wanting to know where they could buy the product. So that's the first part of your question, right?
Excellent.
And that sort of really, really broadened it. But the biggest thing came, I think we were doing probably 10 to 12 million at this time, and I still knew we were in all these niches all over the country, but we hadn't gone mainstream. And I was on a plane going back to San Diego again from someplace back east, and I was looking at the magazines the girl next to me was reading. It was like People magazine or
Yes.
whatever the local paparazzi type magazines are in England. You would get that.
Flashy ones, yeah.
And it was like all these stars walking around and they're wearing so and so brand jeans or they're wearing so and so brand whatever shoes, whatever. And I thought, how do I get into that market? And I found out that there was a group of people in Hollywood called stylists, which I'd never heard of. And they were people who, the hair people and the makeup artists and the wardrobe people, these are all stylists, and they create what goes on TV and what goes in the movies. And so I sent out I found a mailing list and said, hey, if any of you want a pair of Ugg boots, just give me a call. I'll give them to you for free. And out of 400 people, 40 called up, and I sent them Ugg boots. And within months, I started seeing them on TV, and then within a year they were in movies. But best of all, they were like, if they were doing, for instance, Cameron Diaz's hair, she's saying, well, what are those things? Oh, these are Ugg boots. Yeah. Hey, can you get me some? And so then it became really, really cool for these Hollywood people through their stylists to get hold of Ugg boots.
That's brilliant.
And then the paparazzi started shooting them, and that's when the entire thing took off worldwide.
Right, wonderful. And that's amazing. I mean, what do you think it is about Ugg boots then? What's the clear message it gives? What is the experience it gives? What is a brand? What is it the brand that people can really accept and relate to?
Okay, there's three really good questions. What makes them good is the instant I'll tell you what, the saying that I've heard more than any other in my life is, oh my God. And that's the feeling when you put a pair on with bare
The wow
feet.
factor, right? The wow factor. You've captured a wow factor.
It's just the most incredibly sensual feeling to put them on with bare feet, especially that first time. Then what makes the brand? The brand undoubtedly is good marketing and quality. Without quality, your brand's worth nothing. But if people can come to expect that every time they go into a store and they look for that brand, they know what they're getting, right? That's not the same with McDonald's, even though I don't eat that food, but everybody knows what they're going to get when they walk into McDonald's. It never changes, right? And so UGG was this intense passion I had for quality. And then the third thing is what makes a brand is all the impressions that you get out there from the advertising, and like in the beginning we had to pay for it because of all the magazines and stuff, but once it started getting its own momentum, then it started showing up like in magazines, and that was.
It's like having like celebrity people endorse your products as well. That helps with the promotion, and I think it's a whole load of marketing techniques going on here, but I think it's really amazing how it all happened. It's like a story unfolded.
It totally unfolded because I had no roadmap when I started. I mean, I was an accountant, and I did do a couple of courses at UCLA Graduate School of Management there in marketing,
right.
And it's funny, I topped every exam and never studied because it was just intrinsic to me. I just totally got it, and I put that into action. With the boot business. In fact, if I had done an aptitude test, I probably would have gone into marketing instead of accounting.
I think as entrepreneurs, marketing is very exciting because it's very creative. You get to create a lot of kind of ways to market your products. There's no right or wrong way. It's always in the entrepreneur's kind of creativity power. How well you do.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
Excellent. Well, this is amazing stuff. I mean, now I want to ask you. Okay, now so people that have got products, let's talk about them first. Maybe they're new to the business. Can you just kind of advise what is the best way to get funding? Because I know this is something where a lot of people struggle with. They need the kind of money to get started and get promoted, and the right team. Having a strong team around you, it costs money. And what is a good funding proposal to an investor, and what are investors looking for?
Okay, that's a really easy answer. There's a couple of phases that you have to go to. When I was starting out, there were you would hear the term business plan,
yes.
But it was like a horrendously expensive exercise to go through. Now you can go online and buy business plan programs,
right,
that are very good. And what it does, it'll help your thinking process, yeah, to figure out, okay, cash flow, seasonality, sales, cost of production, shipping. And it makes you go through all of these thinking processes, yes, to figure out exactly what it is, and then it'll help you with the pricing and how much margin you have to add to do that. Now, had I done that when I started UGG, instead of the $500 I borrowed, I would have realized I needed like $100,000, $200,000 to start.
Right.
And nobody would have heard of UGG boots today because I would not have done it. Right? So you have to balance this ignorance with savvy business now. Because the internet has so much information, it's easy to do the business plan, but never give that business plan to a potential investor.
Right. Okay.
Because they will just glaze over and go, oh my God, I'm not reading 15, 30 pages of this. I just want to know three things. How much do I have to put in?
Right.
Number one. Number two, how secure is it? And number three, how do I get it out?
Right.
With a profit. They're only three. They don't care how emotionally you are tied to the best new thing. I'm going to change the world, and people are going to love me.
Right.
They don't give a damn.
Right.
Money people are very, very particular about security. Number one, they want to know how safe is it. That's why banks will only loan you money if you've got enough assets to make sure they get it back. Right?
Right.
So that's the number one critical thing. The two is the level of return, which comes with the payout.
Right.
And three, how much is it? Because they've got to be able to afford it. But the good thing is each investor I brought in, they were sort of indifferent at first to the business, but being in it for 6 months to a year, they all became as passionate as I was about it for me.
Right.
And if you're lucky enough to attract that sort of investor that does understand the product or the technology or the service, then that's just a bonus that comes along with it.
Absolutely fantastic.
There is one other danger with taking in money, though. Every investor thinks the business starts the day they put the money in.
Yes. I'm
right?
so glad you mentioned that.
That's a critical thing to know going in with investors, because they don't give a damn how many sleepless nights you've had, how many years you've been plugging away at it, how many friends you've enticed into loaning money. They do not care. They think the business starts the minute they put their money in.
I see. Excellent. There are some amazing points there, Brian, that you've mentioned. The audience is actually going crazy. I'm going to pick out one question, which is quite a good one. It's by Fiona. Thank you, Fiona, for joining the show today. She's saying, if Brian went back and went for the investment part to look for investors, having no market for the product, how would he convince just by a vision? Does that make sense? Yeah, I think. Yeah,
I do understand that, and the answer is I couldn't convince anybody.
Right.
There was a group that were my very first investors. They bankrolled me for $20,000, and that was more because they were making a lot of money selling oil leases, and they had to put it somewhere. So it was more driven into finding investments than being really enamored by the investment, right?
Right.
But then as we grew, I would try and get bank financing.
Right.
And for years it was, those things are a fad, they'll never catch on, or that's a fad, it'll be gone next year. Now, even when we were doing 5 million, 7 million, 9 million in sales, I was still trying to finance increasing production needs every year.
Yep.
And every year, this is like 12, 15 years into the business. Oh, it's a fad, it'll never last. They'll be gone next year. Wow. And so convincing investors is a very difficult thing. You have to show, like I said, security and great returns, and you'll get the money. And so when I was starting out, I couldn't promise any of those things, because nobody really got it. It's always, when you're in that position, it's always friends and family to get you started, and then maybe you'll find an angel who just likes you and likes the idea. But I mean, every inventor and every business starter will go through that same process.
Wonderful. Now, Brian, I'm actually interested now. I mean, you sold the business now, right? But why didn't you kind of keep it going and maybe invent like Ugg gloves or something, or Ugg scarf, or I don't know, anything, like kind of, carry on?
Well, that sort of happened.
All right.
But not with me. We got it up to, this is like after about 17 years in business. I'm going to go back to, remember when I was surfing in Malibu and I sold boots out of the back?
I remember.
Okay. Well, a couple of cars up, there was another guy called Doug Otto, who he had a little sandal, which was neoprene. It was yellow, pink, and yellow, like a triple-decker, really high-heeled sort of thong.
Right.
And he was selling those out of the back of his truck.
Right.
So we got to know each other this is right at the very beginning, and we would always be crossing paths. You know, he'd be on the road selling, and I'd be on the road selling. And he eventually grew his business, and then took on a sandal called Teva, and that was a huge seller in the like outdoor market. And he took his company public on that, right?
Right.
And so let's fast forward. Now I've got this, 15 million in sales orders, and looks like we're going to get another 5 of refills. So that's like a $20 million season.
Right.
And I just literally couldn't bankroll the production, buying the product.
Right.
Because our sales were only 3 or 4 months of every year.
Right. That's another question I need to ask you. So,
yeah, and it was so difficult, because then we'd collect the cash for the next couple of months, but because we had no summer income, we had to have this humongous inventory build up. Now, when it was 100,000 in sales, that was not a big deal. When it was 1 million in sales, our manufacturers would bankroll us. But when you get up to 15 to 20 million, everybody's saying, "God, I'm not going to give you that much credit. I want security," right? And so here we were in the best season ever. Ugg was now, like I told you, it was now getting picked up by the Hollywood set.
Yeah.
And we had no idea I didn't have any idea how to raise the money, because my business plans were still being looked at as a fad. And I was in Atlanta airport going to this big trade show called the Super Show.
Right.
And way down the other end of the baggage claim was Doug Otto.
Right, okay.
And he'd just taken his company public at that time. I knew he had 20, 30 million in the bank, and I just got goosebumps all over me. And again, that's my spirit going, "Oh, Brian, you're on the right track,"
Wow.
And I went, "Oh my God, his business dies every winter. My business dies every summer."
Brilliant.
I walked down and we sort of saw each other and high-fived, and I said, "Doug, if we're going to do this, let's do it now." And we that afternoon, the accountants were talking to each other, and that was the beginning of the merger. And so I had lots of options to stay on, but I love starting businesses. I really don't enjoy being in a corporate structure.
Right.
And if I had stayed on, I would be in meetings all day, and then every meeting would end up with a consensus, which is like less than great, and that sort of stuff drives me crazy. So I love the being freewheeling and have the ability to control my own destiny, And so I just decided to sell out for cash, and I had a bunch of investors, so we all shared that. It was a fantastic sale, and I just went on to other things,
That's beautiful. I love this journey that you're taking us on. I mean, it's amazing because there's so much that's, as I said, we just see the front end of it. We don't actually know the story behind it, the details, the processes, the decisions that you have to make, and all these kind of things. So it's really, really cool for people to see what kind of traits it takes. Now, I want to kind of cover people that don't want their own products. So let's talk about people that want to start their own businesses, but they don't want to get into a franchise model. Okay, it takes a lot of investment, offline structure, whatever it is, and they go online, because the new thing online is that you can actually start a business in an area called network marketing, and actually build someone else's company and their products. Now, what is your thought on that, Brian? I mean, how powerful do you think network marketing is, the industry itself?
I think it's the future. I really do. But it's had a really bad rap because there've been some unscrupulous people that never followed through with the product.
Yes.
And they scammed all of the. They not only scammed the public, they scammed the people within their organization. Yeah. By getting big upfront fees and stuff like that. So having had that really unlucky start, there's tons of companies out there now that have a really good product, and they really are looking out for their employees. And when I say employees, I mean people in the downlines.
Yes.
And as long as it's structured and run ethically, so that the commissions are paid on time, and there's enough profit in the product to make this thing a long-term thing, I think that's the way of the future. It started with, like, way back with Tupperware and Avon. That they were an Amway. Those companies were very ethical,
Yes.
and they've lasted 30, 40 years. And so I think that, because when I was starting UGG, you really only had the print media to go out and advertise.
Yes.
And it was horrendously expensive, and it was very short-lived.
Yes.
But now you could put a website up, and I'm going to tell you another story here. Sorry for trying
Go for it.
but it helps me make the point.
Yeah.
Okay. I went down the very, very first time we just imported our 500 pairs of boots, and we went down to Action Sports Retailer, which was the very first issue. And I'd seen the first issue, and this was the second issue of that magazine that became an incredibly huge force in California marketing. But this was like back when it was really small, and they said, well, for the full page ad is $1,100, but if you do 2 months, we'll give you for $1,000.
Right.
And I just went, you're kidding me? We're so small, nobody's even heard of us. And the salesman came back. He said, Brian, it's not how big you are; it's how big you are perceived to be that counts.
Wow, I love that. Wow. Okay. And
he convinced us to buy a full page ad. But that wisdom made me look at every single brochure I did, and every single time I did a printed piece for advertising, I had that thing in the back of my head that I want to be looking like $1 million, right? So now let's fast forward to your question. It cost us a ton of money to look really good, but now on with websites, even if you're working out of your garage, you can spend a couple of $1,000s and make your website look as big as IBM or Ford or Audi. You can make your business look like $1 million, and nobody's going to come and check if you're working out of your garage.
Yes, that's so very, very true. Yes.
Right? As long as you've got the right image and a good product and the ability to ship and do that, then it's so easy for individuals now to start their own businesses, even if they're in a multi-level marketing type of industry. Your reach to get out to other people and consumers is so much greater. So yeah, I think that take advantage of the internet tools that you have.
Excellent point, Brian. I love the way that you've mentioned that, because it is important. Because the thing is, I think we're not really grateful for the facilities we have. I mean, compared to the struggles, like for instance you faced back in a few years ago before the internet. I mean, it's nowhere near how hard it is to do something now and to kind of reach the right people. Okay, another thing, reaching the right people. How important is that? Connections, being available, being present. Okay, can you fine tune luck and opportunity?
Okay. There's some good examples. How long? What's the time? How long have we got here?
Sorry, I've goodness, we're about 5 minutes to the hour.
Okay. Then I'll tell a.
I can take for time, Brian.
Okay. The USA Today story was sort of luck, but there was a lot of preparation went into getting that. I don't think in terms of luck as much as I do in terms of karma. If you put out the effort, there's going to be a return somewhere. Often you don't even know where it's coming from. But there was one girl that used to call us every Christmas, an English girl, and she'd always buy 20 or 30 pairs of boots for her family, and friends back in England.
Right.
And it was a sort of a hassle, but we used to go through it anyway. And it turned out that it was Trudy Styler,
Right.
Sting's wife. And she called me up, after a while we knew who it was, so we really looked forward to the order. But she called me up and said, "Hey, Brian, look, I've just been to a seminar. It's changed my world. I want the most perfect pair of size, whatever, tall sand Ugg boots, and here's where to ship them, And I got a pencil out, and she says, Oprah, care of the Oprah Winfrey Show, And we sent them over. This was the last year I owned the business, and that sort of began an affair with Oprah on TV with the best pics of Christmas. 20 minutes of nothing but Ugg boots on national, worldwide TV.
Right.
And so that's an example of karma. Had we blown off Trudy because it was outside of our normal business, had we blown her off, we never would have got that. And that sort of set the Ugg business on a completely new trajectory. So I know that there were instances where I used to always remember when I sort of lost the company. Well, I went out and started over. I was over servicing all of my customers. I was looking after their inventories, and I was being an incredible, just partner basically.
Right.
And then fast forward a few years, and the three guys, one bought the other two out, and then he died.
Right.
And I went through this period of 6 months not knowing if I was going to be able to survive in the industry.
Right.
And ultimately I did, and it was only because of the loyalty of all of my customers who refused to go with a knockoff brand and stuck with me. So there's another example. It wasn't luck, it was karma. It was all of the work,
Relationship building. It's relationship building with your
100%, yeah.
Excellent. That's absolutely right. Well, we're coming to the hour, Brian. I know. We've done a lot of talking, and there's so much more we could talk about. But we will bring you back at a later stage. But Brian, I mean, you've got a book, okay? You put a book together, and I want to talk about the book for just a couple of minutes. I mean, the birth of the brand. I mean, the birth of a brand. What have you put in that book? I mean, what is it? What would readers gain out of that?
Well, I wrote it for entrepreneurs. I just love entrepreneurs, and I love helping them. And all through the UGG period, I was always pulling out articles, thinking that'd be good in a book one day. That'd be good in a book.
Right.
And so just recently, I pulled all those things together and wrote. It's the story of me coming to America, and it starts off with me being an accountant,
right.
and it walks us right through all of the 17 years that I built that business, and it's nothing like 5 ways to profitability or it's 10 ways to be a better leader. It's not that type of book.
Right.
It's very spiritual, very philosophical,
Right.
and I go into all the disasters that I had to encounter and how I overcame them, and it gives you the euphoria of the big wins that we had. So it's a really, really easy to read book that just highlights things for entrepreneurs. And all my friends who have read it just say it's a page turner, because at the end of every chapter, which is like each chapter is a year of the 17 years.
Right.
And at the end of each chapter is, oh my God, what can happen next? and so everybody loves it because of that. But it's a very easy to read. But at the same time, it's very serious entrepreneurial tips from boots on the ground.
Excellent. Well, guys, this book, you can find the links below under the video. There's one for UK. If you're tuning in from UK, you can get the UK one from Amazon. Or the other one is on Amazon America. So if you're tuning in from any other place, then it's .com, yeah? So I've got both links underneath. Wow. So, I mean, Brian, there's so much more we can talk about. I mean, we've literally touched the surface, but we've gone into a lot of depth where people can kind of take away a lot of ideas from the show of what it takes to be an entrepreneur, right? But what is your final kind of message for the people listening? I mean, if they're in a job, if they're stuck, they're not happy, they're a bit scared of getting into the entrepreneur world because it's a complete different shift. It's a different dynamics, it's a different kind of paradigm, being your own boss and things like that. But is it worthwhile?
Yeah, I'll tell you what, just following your dream is always worthwhile.
Yeah,
And I'm not going to just say drop everything and be an entrepreneur because it's not that simple.
yeah,
You know, you got kids to feed and you've got bills to pay. You know, so the best advice I can give to people who are in a job that but are not really happy with it is figure out what you can do better than anybody else
yes.
and then start.
Excellent.
And you can start on the weekends, you can start in the evenings after work, you can start. There's nothing stopping you from following your passion. And as it grows and as you start to get momentum, like remember the infancy stage,
Yes.
you can have that infant growing while you're still working another job. But once it starts toddling, you're going to be faced with a question. Okay, I can break and follow it 100%, or I can sort of let it go because you can't sort of have it grow while you still got another job.
Right.
That decision will be an easy one because you'll have already figured out how to make money out of your passion and your interest.
Excellent, wonderful. And final question coming from a lady. She's saying that what books do you read? Is there any books that you can suggest? Is there anyone that you followed? Is there any mentor that you had?
Um, I read a ton of philosophy
Yes.
and a lot of adventure stuff. Wilbur Smith, adventure stories. But as far as business goes, the one book that I got a lot out of was Richard Branson's book, Losing My Virginity.
Right.
And the main thing I got out of it was that he said a statement something like, the one thing that's never changed from selling newspapers on the streets of London to owning, Virgin Air was that I've never had the luxury of not having to raise money.
Excellent.
Right? And I'd spent 15 years in business feeling like a failure because I was always having to raise capital.
Right.
And he let me say that okay, that's okay. I could let that go, and I'm okay with that. So that was a huge thing. But I think business books that have a philosophical bent to them are probably the best.
Excellent. Wonderful. Thank you so much, guys, for tuning in. I mean, you've hanged on over an hour now. But, Brian, I mean, as an entrepreneur, you never stop growing. Your visions carry on. One goal's hit, another one comes up, So what is your dream? As you are on the I Have a Dream show, what is your dream?
My dream is just to stay happy every day and to follow what energizes, inspires me. It's just, and that means staying in business and giving back. I love talking. I love speaking from the stage to groups of entrepreneurs or, small business people, multi-level marketing groups. I really do it because it's sort of a give back. And I know I help so many people because when they come off stage, they go, "Oh, Brian, thank you. I was going to give up, but now I realize I'm just in this infancy stage, and so I can affect people's lives by talking, and I love doing it. I travel all. I'd love to come to London sometime and talk.
Absolutely, I would invite you to my event.
Any of your listeners are interested in that, my website is briansmithspeaker.com.
Yep, we've got the link just below below Brian, so you can.
Okay. And so just contact me there with any interest, and I'd love to talk about it.
That's absolutely fabulous. That's beautiful because the thing is, no matter how much money you make, Brian, I mean, it's the beauty and the happiness and the higher self is always in contribution, right?
That's for sure, without a doubt. The money is sort of the money just comes by doing something good,
Right, absolutely wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Brian. I mean, thank you from the heart for actually taking time out and coming onto the show, sharing your incredible journey. Viewers, thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you've picked up lots and lots of strategies, made tons of notes. I would encourage you to actually watch this all over again and make sure that you pick up the points that Brian's mentioned to make just to kind of give you, just shorten your journey. I mean, there's always a process that you have to go through, but knowing where some mistakes are made, it helps you kind of avoid them. You know, it makes your journey a little bit more easier in a way to kind of, you know, a bit more smoother, but knowing what to avoid. But excellent, having the internet, guys, leverage that. You know, you've got resources all around you. It's just about being resourceful and being very, very creative and chasing those dreams. Never give up. Thank you very much for tuning in. Back on next Monday. Look out for the banners, who's going to be the next guest. But thank you so much and have an incredible, incredible week. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you. It was fun.